Hello guys, welcome to another lesson. In our previous lesson, we had an introduction to data structures, and in this second lesson, we are going to be looking at types of data structures. And for a recap, in the previous lesson, we focused on what was a data structure, we focused on the goals of a data structure and the need for a data structure. We should recall that data structures are basically ways of organizing data in a computer system, or ways of classifying and organizing data in a computer system, and ways on which that data can be accessed. So in this lesson, we are going to be looking at types of data structures. And of course, it will help us to understand the different classification or the different classes of data structures in a computer system. So let's ride on. Now, in our lesson plan for today, we are going to have a lesson title, which we have already given, introduction, lesson content, conclusion, and practice exercise. So this is our agenda for the class of today. So let's continue. Introduction. Now, data structures can be broadly classified into two categories. We have primitive data structures and we have non-primitive data structures. So take note, two broad classifications: primitive data structures, as we are going to see, simple data structures. Then we have non-primitive data structures, which is complex data structures. So the figure below illustrates the classification of data structures. Let's look at the diagram critically. You see that there is a root, which is data structure types, split into two. So you can see from the left, we have primitive data structures. To your right, we have non-primitive data structures. For primitive data structures, we have examples of primitive data structures. We have integer, float, character, string, booleans. And for non-primitive data structure, we have linear and non-linear. For linear data structure, we have arrays, we have stack, we have queue, we have linked list. And for non-linear data structures, we have tree, we have heap, we have tree, and we have graph, and we have hash tables. So this table gives us a global view of the different types of data structures. So my dear students, most importantly, understand how the diagram is arranged. Under non-primitive data structures, they are further divided into two: linear and non-linear. Okay, and of course, primitive data structures are simple data structures. They are classified into 5. Okay, so we take note of the diagram. The diagram paints the entire picture of the different types of data structures. Now, for primitive data structures, we're going to start with the first. These are the basic structures that directly operate upon the machine instructions. So which means that they are manipulated directly by the machine. So with these data structures, it is very easy to manipulate. It is very easy for the machine to operate them. They consist of numbers and characters, which are built in the programs. And you see that in this circumstance, it is very easy for the machine to understand them, and it's very easy for the machine to manage them. Now, these data types are also known as simple data types. In other words, they are called simple data types. So we can say primitive data structures are known as simple data types. Now, for example, they include, we have integers, which is, for example, positive and negative whole numbers. We have floats, which are decimals. And of course, we have characters. For example, A is a character, plus is a character. Then we have booleans, which is yes or no. So we should take note that these are the different types of primitive data structures. So they are simple and they can be manipulated directly by the machine. Now, for non-primitive data structures, these are more complex forms which manage groups of primary types. So we are saying that they are derived from primitive data structures. So we are saying that to produce a non-primitive, which is also known as complex, you can derive them from primary. Now, we take note again, they cannot be operated directly by machine level instructions. So non-primitive types can be divided into two, as I mentioned in the diagram: linear data structures and non-linear data structures. For linear data structures, we will see that They have different forms, and it is arranging data in a sequence. So you see, for example, we have arrays, we have lists, we have linked lists, we have stacks, we have queues. So those are examples of sequence. They organize the data in sequence. Now for non-linear data structure, we have the elements do not form a sequence, but instead form hierarchies. So when we want to distinguish between non-primitive data structure, we talk about sequence for linear, and we talk about hierarchies for non-linear. And you'll see that a data structure like an array organizes data in a sequence, whereas a non-linear data structure like a tree organizes data in the form of a tree, as we can going to see. Now, in summary, what should we take from this lesson? Data structures can be classified broadly into two categories: primitive data structures and non-primitive data structures. And we should take note, primitive data structures are basic structures that directly operate upon the machine instructions, and non-primitive data structures are more complex forms which manage groups of primitive data types. So in summary, this is what we should take from this lesson: that primitive data structures, they are basic structures operated upon by the machine instructions. Non-primitive data structures are more complex, which manage groups of primary types. And lastly, non-primitive data structures are further classified as linear and non-linear. So my dear students, for revision questions for this lesson, we have the following questions for you. So try to answer these questions based on the lesson. State the classification of data structures, explain the difference between the different types of data structures, and using a diagram, illustrate the classification of data structures. If you can answer all these questions conveniently, then it means you have mastery on the classification of data structures. Stay tuned, and let's see in the next lesson.